What's the weirdest unsolved mystery? The wife of Scientology leader David Miscavige has not been seen in 11 years. The church insists that she's just too busy to make public appearances. But former member Leah Remini has filed a missing person report for her. Some say she's straight up dead. I can believe that. David Miscavige is known to be violent. When he gets mad at someone, he just beats them up and no one can fight back because of his status in the organization. The Green Children of Woolpit. It's from the 12th century. Two green-skinned children appeared at the bottom of a wolf trap near a town. They spoke no known language and would eat nothing but peas still in the pod. They were a boy and a girl. Eventually the boy died. But the girl flourished and learned English. She claimed that they had come from somewhere underground called St. Martin where the sun never shone. I believe the theory I heard is that they were iron miners. Exposure to iron can cause green tinging of the skin. They might have been born and literally grew up underground. My favorite is probably John Lang's case. Basically, a local activist posts regularly about the Fresno Police Department and about how they were plotting against him. People thought he was crazy until he set up a camera that recorded lots of weird shit, including a bunch of cops parking across the street from his house staring at him in the middle of the night and a van pulling up with a large camera that people theorized took thermal pictures through walls to see if anyone was inside. He posted that weekend. The police was going to murder him and predicted his death. The police released a report saying that he was stabbed repeatedly in the back and then recanted, saying it was supposedly a suicide of a crazy man. The Beale ciphers. Basically, a rich cowboy created ciphers which have the location of his buried riches, worth millions today. One cipher was cracked, but the other two remain a mystery. There is debate on whether the ciphers are real, but the first cipher seems to not be made of random characters, which would indicate the story being truthful. Many cryptographers have spent years trying to break them. That's around here. And you don't hear much about it anymore. But there used to be a problem with people trespassing and digging up private land. What was once a tourist attraction became a nuisance. Gareth Williams. Young man that worked for GCHQ and was attached to work at MI6. Didn't clock in at work for a few days. So the police went to check in on him. They find his body in a bag. In the bathtub. The bag was padlocked shut and the key was in the bag. Under the body. Police concluded that it was nearly impossible for him to lock himself in the bag. The police are pretty sure he was murdered. But the case has gone pretty cold. The man-eating catfish of Nepal. Several people pulled under and disappeared in a stretch of the Kali River in Nepal. Crocs and sharks were ruled out, though perhaps prematurely. The best guess is that catfish had started eating the corpses pushed in the river from funeral pyres and had grown huge. They found a 6-footer in there, but nothing ever proven. Mortis.com. It was a mysterious website that simply showed a login page, prompting members to type a username and password. Nobody knew what the site was for. And hackers and decoders on 4chan attempted to crack the password username to no avail. They did, however, find out the website hosted a huge amount of data and traced its origins to a man named Tom Ling, who hosted other bizarre sites, such as Cthulhu.net, which simply said dead but dreaming. For reasons unknown, the FBI took Mortis.com down. And the question still remains what the website hosted, and why it was so important that the feds got involved. Lars Mittank. Guy goes on a ski vacation, bumps his head hard enough to warrant a doctor's visit, gets diagnosed with a ruptured eardrum, which he takes care of for a couple of days with an antibiotic. He's due to fly home. But while in the airport, he's spotted by the security cameras full on sprinting out of the airport with his luggage. He goes missing after that. I'm pretty sure it was mental issues that came from bashing his head. And he got full on paranoid and ran away from his enemies. Other theories are that he was involved in drug smuggling, so he ran when he had the chance. Another theory is that he was the target of black market organ harvesting. Young guy with good organs and a tourist. Yup. As he sees the airport doctor before boarding his plane home and the doctor advised him not to fly. The abduction of Zygmunt Adamski. Seriously scary dude went missing for I think 2 days and was found dropped on top of a pile of coal with a unidentifiable gel-like substance and his clothes on completely wrong, like whoever addressed him didn't know how to put on clothes. Still unexplained to this day. MH370. We have a rough idea where it crashed, but no explanation why. I have to believe they will eventually find the wreckage. Just maybe not in any of our lifetimes. It took 80 years to salvage the Titanic, and 90 to find and verify the remains of all the Romanov children. The technology will eventually get there, and it's a mystery that will continue to fascinate and inspire investment to solve until something is found. The Villisca Axe Murders. It happened in Villisca, Iowa on the 9th of June, 1912. All 8 members of the family was murdered with an axe, and to this day no one knows who did it. It still remains an unsolved crime in the heart of the Midwest. What's happening to the young men that go missing in around Boston, Mass? Like, why do they leave their groups? Abruptly end phone calls? Then are found in the water after it's already been searched? I believe it's a serial killer, but BPD denies that. The Chicago Tylenol Murders. Wikipedia.org. It gripped the nation suddenly in the 1980s. Police were driving around with loudspeakers telling people to throw out their Tylenol. 7 people died and a fake thigh never even came up with a suspect. According to FBI agent John Douglas, they pretty much know who did it but were never able to gather enough evidence to prove it in court. The guy's in jail for a different murder. I think he was trying to kill one specific person and the poison Tylenol was a way to cover it up and make it look like it was part of a series of random killings. This is just what I recall from reading the book Mindhunter. Sorry it's so old school, but I'd love to know what happened to Amelia Earhart. Definitely not the weirdest, but still. WW2 experts in the Pacific are pretty confident that they now know what happened to her. She either got shot down, or crashed on a Japanese occupied island and got TAC-1 prisoner then executed by them. It's quite interesting. NSFW. The identity of a boy and girl in this famous, creepy as Polaroid photo from the 80s. Note, this is a disturbing photo that depicts 2 distressed looking kids with their arms possibly bound behind them and duct tape over their mouths, lying in the back of a utility van. Based on what I've read, it's been ruled out that the kids in the photo are kidnapped victims Tara Calico and Michael Henley, as was initially believed. But who are they? The photo is pretty well known. And if these were just random people who were just joking around, surely someone would have come forward by now to say that was me. And it wasn't what it looked like. So if they were actual kidnapped victims, who are they? Rebecca Zafor. Her boyfriend's son died falling off a balcony. Soon after, she's found hanging naked from a balcony at her boyfriend's home. It's ruled a suicide. But she was a conservative woman who likely would not have gotten naked to commit suicide. The suicide note was not her handwriting, and her boyfriend searched Asian bondage porn the night before she died. She was tied up, naked, and she was Burmese. The mystery isn't solved, but most people with brains conclude she was held as revenge for her boyfriend's son's death by her boyfriend's brother. The DB Cooper mystery is always entertaining. I like the theory that DB Cooper used the money to start the business IMDb. The disappearance of my best friend, September of 2012. He was last seen at his cousin's house in the woods the night before he went missing. He had no car, no cell phone. No one knew he was out there, as he had just been released from the hospital. He had no form of contact, and all of his belongings were left at the house, including his prescriptions for the epilepsy condition that he suffered from. He left his weed and pipe, and his cigarettes, all of which he never left the house without. Had he decided to go for a midnight stroll through the woods, then he most certainly would have taken those 3 things. An extensive search and rescue effort was conducted for 1 week after his disappearance, including bloodhounds, 30+ volunteer search and rescue, people on horseback, ATV, and even a helicopter. Not a trace was ever found. Not even a scent was found by the dogs. The police turned a missing persons case into a possible murder, and they began investigating. They sprayed luminol all over the house and property, and no blood was found. To this day there are 0 leads. I miss him with all my heart. He was the best friend I've ever had beside my daughter. I love you, Sean Koski. The most prolific arcade game player is unknown to this day. You've probably seen this person's initials. They can be found on arcade machines around the world. Hundreds of thousands of machines bear this person's initials. Who is this mysterious person achieving high scores on arcade machines around the globe and leaving nothing but their mark of Zorro? Who is as? We may never know. The Jameson family case. The picture of the little girl gets me. Some people say she looks like she is crying, some say she is laughing. Dude. Creepy stuff. Regarding the disappearances, it would be nice to see some stories about when someone was found alive many years later, just to cheer us up a bit. Worth its own thread. We had one in Australia where some woman with a family just disappeared in the early 70s. She was always near the top of the missing persons list. Well, probably about 10 years ago she turned up after 30 years. Her husband had been abusive and she'd just left and gone to another state. Had a new family and lived out her life. Wish I could remember her name. Here's an interesting one. The 1969 murder of Jane Britton. A 23-year-old Harvard anthropology student was found murdered in her apartment with some mysterious evidence, an ancient hammer-like tool that was the potential murder weapon. Some red powder sprinkled around that links to a weird burial ritual. etc. There's at least 3 or 4 potential suspects, included a professor, boyfriend, and neighbor, but 50 years later it's unsolved. Also some other killings of women nearby in location and age that might be linked. There's an insane thread on Web Sleuth that's worth the read. It even has her neighbor at the time commenting his own input witness accounts. This is the first mystery of America, the lost colony of Roanoke. This dude, John White, built a colony on an island on the east coast with other hundreds people, including his wife and baby, in 1587. He later then went back to England for more supplies. England was currently at war and needed every ship to fight. He came back 3 years later to find that his colony has been carefully dismantled and every colonist was gone. He found the word Croton written on a nearby tree. There were no sign of violence or a symbol that indicates that the colony is under attack, like 4 GPS arrows pointing to the middle. A theory suggests that they ran out of fresh water and dismantled buildings to build a boat. There is an Indian tribe called Croton too, but there were no evidence that they attacked the colony. That was from my US history teacher. Edit lol YTF. Does this comment get 276 upvotes? Do people scroll down to read this far? That one where a guy is driving down the road and is overtaken by a car that loses control. Flips and goes into some deep undergrowth. The guy calls the cops, who turn up and find the wrecked car with a dead guy at the wheel. The problem is, they discovered that the car had been there for at least 3 years and the body was just skeletal remains. No other car was found. Virtually everything we know of the laws of physics falls into either general relativity or quantum mechanics. Both theories appear to be internally consistent. If they are both right, they should be compatible with one another. It appears they are not. It seems that something's wrong. Scientists don't know what that something is. Not necessarily the weirdest unsolved mystery, but definitely weird and unsolved. And also one that hits close to home for me. The disappearance of Lauren Spira. Young, white, blonde girl who disappeared one night in Bloomington. Back in summer 2011. Police couldn't figure out what happened to her because she literally just appeared to vanish. No one could find her when the state's National Guard reserves combed the surrounding counties. They were getting really freaked out though, because they found a few other corpses that they weren't looking for. I was the same age as her at the time and living in town. Like to go out to places in the same area as where she vanished. The monarch butterfly migrates to Mexico and back every year, starting from as far north as Canada. During the year there are a full 4 generations of butterflies that live and die during the journey. Upon returning back from Mexico, the butterfly manages to find the same trees its relative started out at despite never having been there. The disappearance of flight MH370. I know my total ignorance of aviation knowledge is on full display here. But it just baffles me how in this day and age of sonar and radar and satellites and all the rest of it, how we could lose a commercial passenger airliner. Seriously, WTF.